Greetings, greetings, greetings.
Hey, actually, I think I'm going to move to the other computer.
Oh, nice. All right. I'll be waiting. Drew, your typology is awaiting me for a fun comb through. I only got to scan it for a second, but I'm looking forward to seeing what you turned up, and I can't wait to find out how you made that.
I made it with the usual suspects, our friendly AI friends, and then a little of my own expertise and being able to parse out the answers. There's got to be stuff that's out of scope. Like I saw, like they had tech decks, like finger decks in there.
I love it for that reason. That's great.
Recording in progress.
Oh no.
This is the beginning of the dub version.
That's so good. All right, let me try leaving this one. Oh, leave meeting. Just leave meeting.
Drew, where are you based again?
I'm in Milwaukee right now.
Oh, nice. Not close enough to come party tomorrow.
Thinking of relocating to Chicago in a couple of years.
Nice. Any particular reason?
I just got a job there.
Nice. And are you able to do it remotely for the time being?
I can commute, yeah. Able to commute.
Nice.
There we go. Yeah, the Amtrak station is a 5-minute drive from me, and then it's a 20-minute walk from Union Station to the office. So I actually went down there yesterday to try it out. Played hooky from the JOB.
It's a cool city. I don't know much about it, but I've been there a few times. Good ramen.
Yeah, it was really refreshing being downtown there. Milwaukee is nice, but it's kind of small. And my wife and I have been here well, I mean, she's been here since she was 10, and I've been here for 25 years or more. So a lot more opportunity for the hobbits that we're raising in Chicago. Yeah, I was just walking. I just walk one road. It's Wacker Drive, and I was walking down Wacker Drive, and across the street there's this giant building, and it's all like glass front, and inside it is like this gigantic kraken hanging over a bar, and then there's a sign that says Bazaar Meats, but it's BAZAAR, and I'm like, what is this place? But it looked too fancy for me to walk in there in my short coat. So yeah. It's been a day for technical difficulties. I think it's the moon phase or something. But yeah, I just used GPT-4, and then I just kept asking it. It's like, are there any more? Are there any more? Are there any more? Are there any more? So I had about 50. I was like, okay, that's enough. You can go rest.
It's good. Like the one that stuck out to me as very noticeable was the Filmer board. It's such a classic thing for like the street skate crew to be like, oh, if you put soft wheels on a double kick, it's for filming. It must be to capture the more exciting thing that I'm doing on my hard wheel skateboard. It like presumes an observer, like,
Oh, okay.
it's like there's just like a weird ideology that's sort of implicit in that.
I love that, the detail that that you're giving to it now, and that I figured you'd be able to give to it when I at least came up with, something to start with.
Yeah, there's a lot to be done with that. And like I've obviously in making skateboards have my own typologies for like the types of boards we make,
Okay,
imagining that they satisfy like
sure.
certain things. So it'd be kind of interesting to actually like kind of stack your list up against ours.
Yeah,
I've got
well, that's what I do for a living. So that's is make those kinds of knowledge models and the ontological relationships between them.
yeah, we put together our R&D list for the next few years, and it's like max 17 boards. Like I could see, at some point maybe it pushes up to 20, but like, typical skateboard companies are putting out like 60 boards in a year, like, and it's because they have different graphics and
60
colors
different
and
types or 60 different like models.
I would say models, not types.
Yeah.
Like, the same mini pressed in the same mold
Mm.
with like a different outline and a different graphic. It's the same skateboard effectively.
Yeah, what I interpreted your thought was that you were looking for different types, obviously,
Mhm.
that perform differently on the
Mhm.
street.
And it's a bit of column A, a bit of column B. Like maybe it's not always the same mold, but it's
Mhm.
one mold will get multiple models out of it.
Sure. So tell us about this meeting you had where you got people all excited about fictional data.
Oh yeah. Well, so I mean, there's one and then another. The guy Vince works at Caltrans, and he's like one of the leads for their active transportation planning.
Mhm.
So that's big because he's interested in like state level solutions. And he turned me onto this grant program through the California Transit Commission.
Mhm.
And I guess every couple of years they've got like tens of millions of dollars available. So he thinks that we should try to do something in collaboration with the SFMTA to propose like some multi-million-dollar project to do skatable sidewalks.
Okay.
So
Okay.
that's pretty cool. And that's a couple of years out. And so he sent me the rubric for the grant proposals. So I'll send that to you because I'm sure you'll be interested. And it's like pretty in depth, it's like rigorous GIS study type stuff, but it's the sort of thing that like your data viz work, if we knew exactly what to measure,
Mhm.
we could increase the likelihood of getting access to funds like that. So
Okay.
and that's like a 2-year project, like, so, there's plenty of other fun fictions to be made in the meantime, but that would be a real way to,
2 years is pretty short, I guess, from my perspective. When it comes, I work, projects that I've worked on in the past, like 18 months, 24 months, that's, I worked in the architecture industry. So some of those are pretty long. They go pretty long. So
yeah, it flies by. So they won one recently here in the city. I got to look at it a little more closely, but basically I'm getting a clearer sense of like there being a pathway to real financing for real solutions. And a lot of different people have their active communities plan, active transportation plan, but this one through the California Transportation Commission is the first one I found that has like real funding, not just community outreach programs where a bunch of planners then go into some back room and decide what to make of everybody's proposals, or opinions, I should say. And then the other meeting I had was with the Safe Routes to School people here in the city. They've got like a bi-weekly meeting, and it's like the Unified School District, Walk SF, Bike SF, all these folks, and they've heard about me from somebody else who leads the meeting, and they were just like, "Oh, Aaron, it's so good to meet you. We've heard so much about your work." And I've just like never been in a Zoom room like that where people are like, just like, so
well, we could do
excited.
that here. I mean, if you'd like that, so we could do that when you show up here. So
Yeah.
self-validation from the NFL. Is there, you see any avenues for like new design fictions that can plug into this work, or is it all just like straight grant writing and things like that?
I mean, I kind of like the idea of making the fiction as if we won the grant
Hmm.
and then writing the grant.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
I think that'd be more fun.
yeah. Well, it would inform how you write it too.
Mhm.
I like that. I like the wallpaper guide
Chat-
to the
chat.
skatable city too.
Yeah, I think you should, if you're gonna do the design fiction thing, you gotta show the world that the grant will deliver, not just write it, deliver it in some archetype. Right? And that archetype could be a city map, it could be a wallpaper guide, I think is probably richer in some ways. So it's, a lot, because they're gonna be like, no, you gotta write your 40,000 word grant response, because we gotta put everyone through that torture. But then you say like, and also here's the exhibit. Like, this is the world that we're creating. And maybe you don't even represent it that way. Maybe you're just like, here's our response to your RFP. And a newspaper, maybe it's all these things in a way, a wallpaper city guide, a local, maybe not the scale of like the Chronicle, but maybe it's a, like every neighborhood has its newspaper, or they used to. Venice has the Argonaut. And so just fill that world out. And in that filling the world out, you don't do it after you've written the grant, you use it to help you write the grant. Matter of fact, the writing of the grant is like the pain in the ass, but it's like, let's build the world that we want to do, create these artifacts that as if we, went to that future with the skatable city. And now it's actually easier to write the grant, because now you have a better sense of what you're trying to do, and you've been able to exhibit it in a more visceral way. So you're starting with the imagination, right? And then you sort of trace back. It's like, I'm going to bring all this imagination to these grant people who are all structured. I mean, I'm sure they're lovely people, and they're expecting it to be filled out in this particular way and have the whole, who are the authors and all that kind of stuff. And you bring them all the material, but all that material has come from this other world. I'm not saying like write a piece of fiction, the grant proposal, but you do it in the right way. But you do that after you've built the world with these artifacts.
Yeah, that sounds right to me. I went to this other community meeting the other day that was like, the San Francisco Active Transportation Project, or Active Communities Plan, is doing outreach with like various community organizations. And this one was with the Soma Pilipinas, and it was like this room full of like super elderly Filipino people who like all, take the bus and walk and ride Muni and all this stuff. And they had like their own set of concerns, and like, they passed out some flyers for like a mural opening and some other thing. And, it was like these, things cut out of like 8.5 by 11, like saturated with ink, for the launch of their mural or something like that. To me, seems like that's like an archetype, right? Like, what does it look like to pass out the hand cut thing made on the inkjet printer to all the old folks? And like, what's the event that they're being invited to? Like, it was a mural launch to show like their cross-generational, cross-continental community. And like, what if that just also included something that was skatable? It's just like it's like a 1 degree to the left. But those little archetypes, and because it was some of their pressing questions were like, well, when are we going to start ticketing the bicyclists and the skateboarders who ride on the sidewalk? Because they see the sidewalk size as a fixed thing, right? And so they want to make sure that their area is protected. But it lit up a lot of stuff for me. Like, well, there's the sidewalk and the bike lane, but there's no like mid-speed mobility lane. And so I think like, architecting those things, even making architectural drawings, right? I know somebody who can make that kind of stuff, who makes them for city officials and tech campuses and stuff like that. It'd be kind of fun to like have the architectural drawing for the skatable bike lane.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like it. That's exactly the approach I take with data fictions, is you make it first with fake data, and then where what's missing, you can identify the gaps, and then you know how to build out, the actual useful, valuable thing.
I mean, you can, depending on the data you have, but like when I did the annual report for my company Amino, like it was all real data. I mean, it's all real, financial projections. It's incredibly,
Mhm.
it was just ridiculously sized spreadsheet, appropriately sized for, if you're doing financial modeling, you want to model your company out for 4 years, and you can, add new products and merch and payroll and, utilities and all that kind of stuff. So it's like I had the data, and so I said, sort of imagine it. It's like, well, probably, let's say two collabs a year, collaborations with other brands, one new product a year, and like this is the size of the team that I think that I need to do that, and maybe incremental growth over the year, cost for insurance, all that kind of stuff. It's just like the numbers are there. You look at it, and it's like, for most people, it's just kind of like, okay, just show me the last page where it shows the graph going up and to the right. Of course, you show it because that's what it's a fiction. Yes, I'm not going to show it's going down to the left. It's like, it goes up, up, up. But then what does that look like, and what does that feel like? Beyond just the graph that everyone expects to see. And even just like arbitrary things, like one of my investors is like, just get it to $25 million a year run rate. Like, okay, blah, 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 there it is. That was easy. But then what does that mean in terms of in both materially, what are you gonna have to do that you can fuck around with on the spreadsheet? But then even more importantly, what does that look like in the kind of terms that most 99 out of 100 other humans care about? What are you selling? What's the brand logo? What's the vibe? What's the retail shop look like? Just take me to that place, immerse me in that. And you cannot, there are very few people who feel like they can, their imagination just swoons when they are spending their day in an Excel spreadsheet, I guess is the point. So you can have that data to the degree that don't fret over it, because it's all a fiction anyway. But you can say, someone says like, well, where's your data? It's like, these are our projections, and we think that these are the best that we can do, and they make reasonable assumptions, and they're using best practices and all that kind of stuff. And then they're like, cool. And you're like, hey, but check it out. This is the article in Monocle magazine about the company. And they're like, ooh, now we're talking.
Mm-hmm.
Here's the retail shop on Mission. Oh, nice, exposed brick. Love that.
Yeah, I really do love the idea of like, I see the city wallpaper thing being like at the BART stop, like on 16th and Mission, or 24th, up the street from the skate park. And it's like, it's in Spanish and English and Tagalog, and it's doing it for everybody. We've got posters all around the city right now, or at least all around the Mission, for this event we're doing tomorrow. And I like stopped to invite the crossing guard that works down the street from the school. And I was just going to invite her on my own. And I looked up and I was like, oh, there's the poster already standing right next to where she's working in Spanish. Like, that one over there. We'll see you tomorrow. Wrapped in like the classic fashion, as they do like most official papers here in the city. They wrap the poster around the pole with saran wrap.
Yeah, great. I'm sure it makes all the municipal workers super happy to remove.
Yeah, well, we had the same thing on my corner for the parking meeting. I should take a picture of this. I should just go get a picture of this and put this in the archetypes thread, because it's right there.
Probably because using staplers are illegal, because I know they've done that because the posts get all full of staples. But saran wrap is unique. I haven't seen that here. My corner of the world.
Yeah, for when it's raining,
Funny.
right?
I get it. Yeah, it rains here a lot. We should probably do that.
I wonder if they have even more defensive, like anti-rain strategies in the Pacific Northwest. Just fortified saran wrap.
Hey, Jed, what's going on? We got a lot of work this week and weekend. And I'm in Detroit.
Hey, sorry. Yeah, you in Detroit now?
No,
No, you're not. You're at home.
I'll be in Oakland in a few hours, and I'll be in Detroit starting. Flying on Tuesday.
Yeah. That sounds like a fun trip.
It'll be cool. I would actually, just because of this project, I would actually rather not, but it is gonna be a fun trip.
Yeah,
But it's like, cause I was like, I know I could get this project done, no problem if I just had the week. But it's like the week with, I was like, oh, now we gotta go meet this person, but it'll be good because in Detroit, I wanted, my main goal out of the Detroit thing, aside from like meeting with people and doing a presentation or two, is to situate us to do an event there. Largely because Detroit is fascinating, and also there's there are a bunch of people who are in positions where they can probably facilitate like the kind of logistical and material arrangements that we need,
yeah,
event spaces and that kind of thing.
yeah, that's cool.
But
Is that-
we got this other thing we got to do. We got to get this
Yeah.
book done.
Yeah. Well, I've been trying to put some visuals together for it anyways. Or ideas of that.
Yeah. Do you want to just mention for folks what's going on, what we're working on?
Yeah, at the moment, it's well, there's a deadline for, is it next Friday?
I don't think I think there probably some people here have no idea what you're even talking about.
Okay, you start from the beginning.
Yeah, start from the beginning.
Okay. Yeah, okay, so Julian, from I'll keep it brief, but from the beginning, Julian was like, have you been messing with, or okay, this is how it started. He had an image of one of his all-terrain vehicles. I'm like, what's going on with that? And he's like, oh, Midjourney. Are you messing with AI? I'm like, no. He's like, you got to do it. So I asked him for a couple, a place to kind of dive in and point and some prompts, and started with some of his vehicles, and kind of shoehorned in sheep instead of vehicles. So that's sort of where my thinking is a lot. And so it turned into, it's kind of like my comfort zone, like.
Yeah.
So,
I get it, like squishy hooked animals. So
yeah, exactly. So, which is another longer story of where those started. But so it kind of, quickly some interesting visuals started coming up. And then, it was sort of an idea to, become more actively involved with the project within the community. And so trading cards and stickers were sort of out there already for a while. And I was thinking about what Julian was up to with the cars and something that can complement that. And, we kind of quickly just sort of arrived at creating these electric sheep as sort of stickers at first and trading cards. And then as we went through it, it's turned into trading cards, at least for now, for more manufacturing logistical reasons. It seemed to make more sense for that. And then, all generated with Midjourney. And then it's, sort of, I guess, conceptually what was fitting in with the images was also where Julian had started with his with the vehicles. It was sort of like an auto trader in a way. And I kind of threw a couple of images at him and said, well, how would this look as a buy, sell, swap trader mag rather than just autos, but other things. And locally there was one where I grew up in Maine called Uncle Henry's. So we kind of looked at that, and they're just kind of funny and crazy. And so, Julian came up with a pretty interesting, funny paragraph that I pondered for a while and was throwing around. And then it was kind of like these, if someone was selling one of these sheep from the future in a sense, or from one of these mags. And from there, he also started a book that I wrote, but I didn't really write it. ChatGPT is writing it, and he wrote that. In a way, at least that's what the cover says right now. And then that's that. So the cards are pretty well developed for the most part, but I guess the strict deadline here is to get this accompanying book that goes with it out the door, and it seems like that needs to happen by next Friday. And so that's where Julian's talking about, like, it's a busy week, is to try and pull all this together while he's away. So I'm kind of in the process of gathering the visuals to complement some of the text. And yeah, it's I guess it's more in Julian's court of, like, the book layout and development stuff. I've kind of been more focused on the cards per se, but this one needs to be handled first if we want to get it into the manufacturing process.
Yeah, it's just a manufacturing deadline.
Yeah,
So that we can have it for this summer.
right. Yeah, and the card thing is, we think it's pretty straightforward, as in, seems like turnarounds can be within a couple of weeks. We haven't actually gone through that yet, but
Yeah.
so yeah, eager to get both of them done here. And so this week will be that, and then hopefully the cards will follow shortly after, and that's where it's at.
Yeah. I went to an event at my little Neuhaus Venice creative social club or whatever, and it's one of those things where it's like it was called Ars Autopoetica, and I just they send you, here are the events happening this week. I generally sign up for most of them if it doesn't sound like it's, if it's and they've just been a bunch that have been like kind of tech and AI related, blockchainy kinds of things. Like, okay, cool. And so I was sitting there and I was like, is this gonna? I was kind of squirming because it's like it started late, and I was like, am I gonna really? Is this gonna be one of those things where people are gonna tell me a lot of stuff that I already know, and it's just gonna be, or even worse, where it's like, I think I know more about that than you do, which is just, that's all my ego talking. And so it kind of started out, and sometimes it's, it can be, if someone's not like a well-tuned moderator, I don't know, maybe I'm just getting an old grumpy man, but I'm just like, man, just, you said enough. It's like, got it. We don't need your whole life history. Yes, we know you're accomplished, and oh my God, you're still going on, like, what the hell? And so there's a little bit of that happening, and then they introduced the one of the two people on the panel, and I was like, oh, that's that person. And I literally had their book on my desk yesterday. And it's what's their name? K something or other wrote Pharmaco AI, which is a novel that was done collaboratively with GPT, 2 or 3 or one of them. And I was like, oh, this is fascinating. And they were better at sort of presenting what they'd done. They didn't feel the need to kind of carry on. It's like, this is what I do, and this is how it works, and this is what it means to me. And so I found that, like, deeply engaging. And then the other person similarly had done so these are people who are doing kind of stuff that we're doing in this beautiful way. And so it became more engaging at that level. There were the things about, sort of people asking, like, well, is it really poetry if you did it with an AI? And so that kind of stuff, I'm just kind of like, but it was engaging. So, just afterwards, I just said hello, invited them to come on the podcast, and it could be kind of cool. So it was super resonant, because it's like, okay, cool. Not unexpectedly that there are other people working with AI, but it's like, oh, this thing that I almost like left early because I was anxious and was wondering if it was gonna be a waste of time. It totally wasn't. And they're actually, when I handed my business card, it's like, oh, Near Future Laboratory, I heard of you guys. Oh, cool.
Yeah. It's good. Was that last night?
That was last night.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I ended up at a sort of a panel talk in the middle of the week with you know, art tech, NFT related stuff. It's kind of a week of that going on.
Hmm.
I think it was Wednesday night, and yeah, it was good because a lot of the people up there were local. I didn't know they were, and that's always kind of nice to see a face, and meet a person, you know,
Yeah.
in the place rather than here. Sometimes, but yeah, it was, anyways, it's good to get out and do that.
Yeah.
I think I gave you a or just like logistically did you see that folder of some of the images?
I saw that you sent it. I haven't had a chance to
Yeah.
open it up.
Yeah, it's fine. It's sort of half organized. I'll continue. Yeah. So are you there for until Friday?
I'm in Oakland and come back Monday morning, and then I leave for Detroit on Tuesday morning and come back Saturday.
Okay. Yeah. Well,
Where in Detroit are you gonna be?
Besides Detroit, is this like more specifically?
Like, are you going into the interior, or are you visiting neighborhoods, are you touring the city, what
No,
are you
it's
doing?
it's I'm gonna be
Held
I
up in the hotel room with, empty bottles of Jack Daniels,
so there's a talk at LTU. They're like the main hosts, and then I'll go see. I think it's on Wednesday. I'll go to Ann Arbor with Brian Boyer, Aaron. So I'm gonna hang out with Brian and do a thing there with students. And I think there are a couple of NFL people I'll meet for coffee
Nice.
when I'm in Ann Arbor, and then
Let me know if you hear anything from him about anything. I've been eagerly refreshing the page.
yeah, I thought you said for me to hand you that sack of money that you gave me. The little brown paper bag, the greasy brown. paper
Yeah,
bag.
yeah, exactly. But, even if we got
And tell them friends of ours are interested in this project.
we can give him $14,000 and he'll give us an additional one.
Yeah.
We'll call it good. Yeah, I don't know when that's going to get announced. Where did you say you were seeing him?
We're we're gonna meet in Detroit, and he's gonna bring me to Ann Arbor and spend the day in Ann Arbor, and then come back to Detroit.
Lovely. That's great. Have you spent much time out there?
But not recently, but yeah, I've been to Detroit a bunch of times, and Ann Arbor.
Yeah, if that grant does come through, I've been thinking about spending my kids got their dad's based out near there. We were talking about going out for over the summer for a few weeks, but I've been thinking about all the different people who work at UMich who I would want to track down. I don't know if there's any kind of like general seminar that could be cool to do with like their automotive department. Like there's a whole department of like car engineering at UMich. It'd be kind of fun to talk to alongside all of the Taubman urban planner types.
Yeah, well, if you do that, yeah, definitely let me know. There's like there are a bunch of people there. John Marshall and his partner Cezanne. They do a ton of stuff in Detroit, but he's a professor there in the Penny W. Stamps, the design school.
Nice. Okay, cool.
Anybody want to chat about the fashion magazine?
Yes, I want to hear about this. I
do?
missed the
Yes.
initial introduction, so I'm so curious.
I don't think there has been. Well, there was, yeah, a little bit. I caught it on YouTube. But and Julian, stop me if I speak out of school for any of it, as I'm just kind of shooting from the hip, but want to do a fashion magazine archetype that's, you know, from some sort of near future. And I think I've been doing a whole lot of stuff and going in a whole bunch of different directions, but it needs to congeal, I guess, in my like the world building needs to congeal. And so that's kind of why I wanted to bring it up and see if anybody is interested in chatting about it, like here or somewhere else, just to kind of flesh out the constraints that the imagination can play in. I'm a big believer that creativity loves a constraint. And then we talk about imagination versus structure, but I'm from a school of thought that imagination flourishes when it has a box to try to break out of. Honestly, so yeah, that's I've been doing a lot of stuff with Midjourney, of course, and then I've got some archetypes here. I've got a Harper's Bazaar magazine, another it's called Cultured, I think it is, yeah, which is more of an art fashion magazine, but just going through it, looking at its materiality. And then I started a spreadsheet to kind of see what the sequences of, double spread pages versus, portraits, how many ads are there to text, and thinking of putting together just some sort of loose percentages or something like that. So not that we have to follow it very strictly, but if you want to match the archetype, if it's 60%, full spread, all image ads with just a brand or something like that, it's whatever archetype we end up creating, maybe fitting that pattern or something like that. But I think it's definitely in need of the hyper collaborative, chipping in with some world building ideas. Does that sound about right, Julian?
Yeah, I think we're just at that formative phase where we're just kind of feeling into the world itself. I do. I mean, I've been saying this, so I'm just kind of repeating myself. But I'm kind of drawn to the idea that it's slightly orthogonal to what people might expect from a fashion magazine from the future. Like, it's not what the trends agency would do, where it's just like, okay, well, I don't know, these advances in kind of fabric material, or now it looks like it's from a cyberpunk world, or they should be, if there are ways in which we can really without like be imaginative and not just be like, okay, well, the trends say it's going this way. So not trying to just parrot what the predictions are, but really, well, what are the interesting ways in which we think whatever fashion might mean in the future has evolved, so that you can have the conversation to say, even, I mean, you did it like etymologically, this is how that term, where it came from. Okay, so where's it going? Is it just going to stick to what it is right now and has been since, I don't know, you did the etymology, since like 1850?
Yeah,
or 1710, when first someone first said like, "Oh, the cravat." This is what we call fashion.
what was
It's
it?
it's on Vogue. Oh, that's a great name for a magazine.
Yeah, late 13th century Middle English, but I like going back to the basic etymology and like working from that point out, as is like a way of doing things, a manner or a style. And I think I like that as a remit for like, it's like a way of doing things as a sort of a definition of fashion. It doesn't matter what, the things doesn't have to be necessarily, what fashion is today, right? But it's to make, what was it? There was a making, a doing, or a working. That's the Latin factio is what it's and I like that too, like starting from that point.
And what's happened? Like, is there, is there, not that we have to state it explicitly, but if we start seeing like there was some kind of disruption, some kind of rupture at some point. We're not saying what it is, but it's like it's taken a turn. So whereas it used to be, maybe had a characteristic of excess or exclusivity or illegibility does it return to a kind of more utility character? I'm just sort of offering sort of perspectives and insights, or is it, what else does it include now that maybe it didn't previously? And where has it expanded beyond, things that I know it, fashion generally includes things that we don't wear, but like how far can we go with, I guess generally like accessories, and then of course consumer electronics tries to play in that space to be fashion oriented. As soon as I guess arguably like Nokia decided to add colors to phones, because before that they were all just battleship gray. They added color, like all of a sudden it's in this fashion idiom, and people are like, ooh, okay. And then design was actually involved. Before that, it wasn't involved. It was just like you get engineers who are like, yeah, this box looks good to put the thing in. And panache, they start realizing like, oh, I guess people respond to color. Let's do that. Maybe we can sell more of these things or bring it into a different level of so it's interesting to me to play in those spaces, because for the kind of larger purpose, which is like you want people to say like, what's going on here? Not specifically to like pointing to a page, but like, who are you guys and what do you do? Because this is not what I was expecting. Like I thought it was just going to be like lots of reflective silver lame and anti-gravity taffeta or something like that. Or so yeah, just as an experiment, and allowing ourselves to really imagine expansively and have fun with it, as opposed and definitely not be like, well, I don't think that's really gonna, I don't see that, because the trends seem to be going this way. Like just make something where someone's like, whoa, look at all this stuff. This is bonkers. What are the advertisements that kind of fill out the world as well? For does food enter into the world of fashion? Like, would it right now? It's, I suppose it. Well, you've got the collection, but imagine it would be weird to see an an advertisement for, what was the thing Dre found the other day for a liquid tree? There's a thing called a liquid tree. See an advertisement for that in a fashion magazine, or just a tree. Say like, yeah, I don't know. It's just sort of my thoughts.
When you guys do world building, like I get that, like when it, like the archetype, you don't want to point directly to like climate change or AI assisted battle drones chasing humans or whatever, but it's that's tangential, but you don't, that's off stage essentially. But when you guys do world building, are you really explicit in your world building behind the scenes in order to inform the rest of what's going on? Or how does that usually, if there is a usual, how does that progress?
My instinct is to leave it at the it's like you feel something, it's like, oh man, that's kind of cool, but not if it feels like it's going to evoke a rich conversation. First of all, if it feels like it's going to make someone be like either, well, that's weird, or oh, cool, what's going on here? Like to start a conversation and ask a question. So usually it's just like a nudge of something that would make sense. At first, it's kind of, you sort of see it and you're like, it feels like it belongs there, but you weren't expecting it. I mean, like the example that's coming to mind was in the autonomous vehicle magazine from the future, having an advertisement for waste management, big, kind of, they pick up the trash, but it's a dumpster that's got 4 wheels, LiDAR array, and it's just zipping around the streets. And so an advertisement for a company that creates autonomous dumpsters, which to me was like, hey, it's funny as fuck. And it's also like, yeah, totally, of course. It's good, there are gonna be all these like other kinds of things zipping around the city in the autonomous future. It's not going to be clean, perfect, these wonderful, sleek municipal buses that make the city and the movement through the city incredibly efficient. There's also going to be all this detritus, because who's going to stop an autonomous dumpster company from making an autonomous dumpster? Someone's going to see that, think of that idea and be like, genius. And you know what? There are already people who are making the platforms. They have the chassis already built out. Let's just weld one of our dumpsters on it, see what happens. Like, when Uber and the rest just dropped the scooters on the cities, and they just appeared one day and caused all kinds of wonderful, beautiful friction and chaos.
I'll add
people-
to that, if you don't mind, Julian. I'll add to that. I think one of the things, I was listening to this documentary yesterday about Rick Owens, and it sort of had this connection to world building, because I think a lot of times in my research with like queer youth who are in gaming, the world building is that it sort of stems from a lack of community or like missing space, right? So like they're building worlds because they're not represented in that space. So it's less of a asking a question or starting a conversation and more of a like a staking a claim or creating an identity space. And I think oftentimes that leads to the question. And then yesterday when I was watching this documentary, or not a documentary, a recap of Paris Fashion Week, they were talking about Rick Owens, who's being hailed right now as sort of the, this rebel of fashion who's now kind of coming into their own as the futuristic visionary of fashion, who set out solely to create fashion that was disruptive because there was no community which looked like him, right? So I think that and if anyone is anyone here like a big Rick Owens cult fan? I asked that question because there's like an entire cult around Rick Owens. So if anybody is, it's really intense. People are like obsessed with his whole like lexicon. But there's something interesting when you're talking about this, because I've been doing a lot of research post this fashion month for my own consulting work. Right now, a lot of people, fashion's sort of in this like weird moment of breaking down. And then people are looking at like, well, where is it going to start building up with tech? The trends are all sort of diluting. Like there's no real static, these are the 5 trends everyone's following. And so I love this idea of this magazine, not looking at trends, but not even trying to predict this idea of like how tech is going to change fashion, but we're just going so far into the future, near future, of sort of usurping what everyone else is trying to like cobble together right now. There's something really fascinating about saying all of that is not what we're doing and just going full on. I don't know what that full on means, but there's something exciting about that, because I feel like everyone right now is trying to figure out how does fashion, the industry, reinvent itself. So I love this idea of this magazine tackling topics or tackling objects or narratives or world building that's not, that maybe no one's even thought of, or they seem completely maybe attached to a historical context, but not, we're not trying to be like, I'm gonna throw the chore coat here in, but like AR filters, right? Like we don't need to talk about AR filters in the magazine because, that's already being talked about within fashion. So maybe we do, but in the sense of like a very futuristic mentality. I don't know, I'm just trying to think, like I love the idea of this magazine not having somebody in fashion reading it and being like, whoa, this is so outside of where we're even going,
It's cool. Yeah. So it's sort of like taking the signals, and instead of extrapolating the signals, doing a gap analysis to the signals, right? And
Yeah.
so like collecting the signals, but then building something from what's not there. I like that a lot.
Yeah, I don't think I really don't think that people in fashion can do that because they are so self-obsessed. As a lot of industries get with themselves, right? I think it would take a bunch of design futurists to come in and be like, we're seeing all these gaps, and then create a bunch of, narratives around those gaps, create worlds that those narratives belong in, and then prototype those objects, or create ads for those objects, or, trailers for those objects. And I think this is, I just think the whole thing is a really cool idea.
Your use of the word signals reminds me of the way that there's relatively little characterization or discussion of sort of primary human inputs, signals, and base perceptions, and that building sort of experiences for low level senses rather than, like you say, count the elaborate, very self-involved industries that arise around fashion, which has a really well-developed sense of the things that it's sort of tweaking and pulling on in terms of your sense of the way that vision and sound and smell impact your impression of things. There are much baser things that we experience, like vestibular action, like the sense of motion that we personally experience and things like that. And the idea of a fashion magazine that sort of characterizes either totally primary or lower level senses, inputs that people even experience at a fundamental level, and saying like, how about a fashion of these? Could be a weird thing to try to play with.
And I think even saying that last phrase, a fashion of these, like I think we're ready to break down the word fashion, right? Like fashioning and decoration or ornamentation, to fashion oneself. Like we've talked about food, right? Like, I listened to a podcast yesterday about, digitally printed food. I mean, that's been around for over 10 years, right? Or if not longer. And so I thought the podcast was wildly delayed, but now people are slowly starting to talk about that again. This idea of fashioning things, the opportunity here for us to kind of like talk about these objects in some way, or these ways of fashioning things. I don't think it has to just be simply about garment or, I always lean towards those things, but I love this idea of it having something so much more broad.
Yeah, I wonder about like what are the invisible things that are made visible in the future? Like how does recycling play into it? How does the factory worker play into it? Is there a one wardrobe policy in the future? Because we've maxed out our our closets per capita problem. I've always sort of been like torn. Like I love like fashions sort of like explicitly sort of expressive and sometimes non-utilitarian approach, but like who is fashion for in the future, right? And like how does the oil field worker intersect with fashion? Does who it's for to get more democratized is not just like the internet savvy youth and like older folks who remain a part of the social elite.
So to this topic, do we have a channel we can start dumping research in? Because right off the top of my head, I have a couple of things I'd love to add to this that we could listen to or look at.
Yeah, Julian created one. Did you create
Okay.
that? So it was just
I'm looking at the Discord now. What's it called?
is that created for just you and me to begin with, Julian? Does it need to have people
No,
added to it? I don't know how that works.
It shouldn't be. Kim should have access, unless I made a mistake, but I don't think I did. It should be not fully
So-
public, but for
What's the name?
Fashion
Fashion
magazine
magazine from the future.
in the future, yeah.
Okay.
I see it at the bottom of the
Got it.
not in a like like judgmental way at the end of the NFL project bracket.
Yep. I love that caveat.
My office was in the basement for 20 years. I'm good down here.
Yeah. I had
So
to be
yeah,
on an-
I'm really noisy in there, but I'm definitely looking for more
awesome.
input to move through. Otherwise, it's just me talking to myself, which is fine. I'm very pleasant to talk to, but it's nice to have discuss this with.
No, I'll geek out on there too. I'm wrapping up a consulting project Monday, so I'll be around more. So can I sort of stem off of Drew, and maybe Drew, you can be part of this. I think it would be nice if we did this in tandem, maybe a little bit, not like it be part of, but I think the thing that's been the Achilles heel of the chore code is the futures narrative part, right? Like that's been something that I want to make sure we really bring to more fidelity. So as you're working on the magazine, or as we do that, this could be a nice thing to come together. If people disagree with that, I'm happy to.
I had actually thought of that. It's like, what if that's the, that's the title story, right? That's the theme, that's because the archetypes always have like some theme or something like that, right?
Yeah. So I was gonna hopefully see if I wanted to do it for today, but I just got slammed with this stuff. So if anybody's free for a call for Wednesday or Friday next week, would people be interested in doing that?
Yeah, I am.
Okay. I'm thinking of more of a deep dive of going over where the chore code is. I want to talk about where Ben and I left with the call that he and I had last, and then sort of where from that call, where I think we could go with the chore code, and then maybe some more focused attention on next steps. Does that make sense for people as far as valuable use of time?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Should we just plan on doing it after Friday's call next week?
Yeah, usually I pick up my kids on Friday, which is like 2:30 Central Time. But
Okay.
next Friday, nothing's on my schedule, and I'm given notice at my job on Monday, so I might or might not have anything to do on the 31st, depending on how they take it. But
All right, I'm going to put in my calendar now before I forget it. So I'll send out something for that for Friday next week. There was, Aaron, were you and I talking about zines? I think so, right? About the popularity of zines?
It's entirely possible. And if not, I love that conversation. So
yeah. So there was, and I think you and I were talking about, I think maybe we had both listened to a podcast, or either you or I just having some information around this idea of zines being wildly popular right now. There was this TikToker, this is going to all sound so ridiculous. There's a very famous fashion TikToker who has gone viral for saying that fashion magazines are dead and that fashion zines are all the thing. And then I feel like, Aaron, you and I may have had that conversation when we were on the phone. But, Drew, do you see this as more of like a niche zine kind of thing?
I haven't thought of that. That's outside of what I was thinking. I was exploring and again, I'm a book person, and so the first thing I'm looking at is what are the patterns in the archetype, and and trying to emulate the Vogues and the Harper's Bazaar and stuff like that. But that's just where I was going immediately. I'm not precious about any of my ideas ever, just for and it's on the record here on the YouTube. I love doing 180s, so I'm happy to do 180s, but I was looking at it as the something that's recognizable, right? That's sitting in the beauty salon or something like that. You pick it up and then start flipping through it, and then you have that wait, what moment kind of thing. So that's what I was looking at. But that's not to say that that archetype always has like millions of inserts that fall out of it when you pick it up, right? You know, so what if it's like a zine inserts or something like that into the archetype or something like that. But zines is I like zines because you can play around with the form factor. You can have like accordion fold zines. You can have all kinds of different artist book approaches to zines. You can have handmade zines. You can have the ones that are, they're mass produced. There's all kinds of different directions you could go with that. And if this TikToker said it's the future, I mean, that's what we should do.
Well, I have the, do you guys know the Whole Earth catalog?
Yes. Oh,
Original?
plug me into this. This is my
Yeah,
shit.
so I've got one of those right here. So I was thinking about that as we were talking. It's like that mixed with like if we did like a TikTok.
A cat or a blanket or both.
Oh, it's my cat right there. Yeah.
It's
I was
both.
thinking about these like,
Like-
like I got these on my, like, I love the way that they do these, like an awful way to represent this right now, but I love the way that I often keep these right next to a lot of my, my like Vogue magazines, just in like old fashioned magazines, because I think there's something really beautiful about the way that these are still set up in that sort of, what do you call it? The way that we were talking about with the short coat existing in those what are those feed house things? Julian, you remember those? What are those things called? Like those feed stores? Yes,
A
Aaron.
co-op. It's called a co-op.
Yeah.
I grew up on a dairy farm. I grew up in those feed stores.
Yeah, I love those feed stores.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Jed,
So I
Jed,
love-
Jed, now we're getting to Jed's sheep.
There's something
Closing it
beautiful. I
in,
mean,
full circle.
this booklet is very much that, right? In many ways, to me. And then I love the idea of sort of like harking back to that physical thing and then maybe doing a digital version of that too. Something about creating a digital zine through a very accessible format. I feel like for fashion folks, they would eat that up,
Hmm.
So, I mean, something about the Whole Earth catalog is that like the idea is that these are tools for living, right? And like I think that's one of the things that's like in conflict with this, like the dissonance between this and fashion, other than the fact that of course it was fashionable to be a subscriber to this, is that like fashion is often about like what's the latest, and like it's disposable, right? And these are supposed to be sort of like durable, tools for durable practice, right? It's like all back to the land, for whatever political power that movement did or didn't have.
If we go
Right.
back to the etymology, it's to make, right? And there's a lot of tools for making and I really like that. And I like what you said before, Aaron, about the where does the factory worker plug in? Because I know this is a growing trend from what I'm seeing in the fashion industry, but like hearkening back to the maker, the garment worker, the people that actually the artisans, right? And I personally would love to like represent, indigenous futures and the maker and things like that in whatever's made. Maybe that's the one tendril, right? That connects to that still is connected to fashion today in the near future, right? Or something like that. But like I mocked up something in Midjourney that was a garment worker in Hindustan sitting on an Eames chair, so you've got the models that are, lounging on the beautiful furniture, but, replace that, and sort of disrupt that. And it's, and it does seem sort of derivative of what the trends are now and not necessarily a gap analysis, but maybe it's a blend of both, because I would love to include that. And also disrupting the focus on fashion as luxury, right? Like doing a lot of, at Julian's prompting, military spec PPE and stuff like that, and, fashion as utility. So what happens? Why is it like that? Because the, going back to the world building, what's happened to money, right? You know, if money is disrupted somehow, then so is luxury, right? And then so what does fashion become, you know, if money is disrupted, right? In some way, if there's, you know, if we get UBI or something, you know, like a global UBI or something, right? You know, to try to bake in some sort of utopianism and positivity, right? You know, instead of dystopian disruption like climate change or something like that, you know. So what is fashion if it's not luxury anymore? If it's not like the Rolexes and, you know, and the fancy bejeweled swatches stuff that I'm seeing in the Vogue magazine, you know, what is it then? You know, what, you know, does it harken back to, you know, things to make other things, right? You know, survival as Julian is we are surviving sort of future.
Right. And like to that end, where do we see each other? Right. Like, you know, when we all saw each other out in like the Parisian you know, avenues, people had tortoises so they could show how luxurious their life was by how slow they could afford to walk. You know, of course, this happening at the same time that like the train is coming into fashion. But, you know, are we primarily seeing each other digitally, like in, you know, 4x3 or 4x5 Instagram posts, or right, like, are we seeing each other on Zoom meetings, you know, and how does clothing or whatever else is included in fashion like change to fit the setting? A lot of fashion stuff is on the internet now, right? There's a lot of like fashion magazines that only ever get published online.
I saw somebody walking a tortoise yesterday in LA and I loved it. Marcel, I guess they're famous on Insta. But yeah, I think I love this idea of making that, and it goes back to what we've been talking about from early calls in NFL about doing and not just talking. And it was funny, I had a dinner meeting 3 nights ago with a guy from Royal College of Art who's in metaverse fashion. And his biggest complaint was that everyone's just talking about metaverse fashion and no one knows how to make anything in metaverse fashion. And I mean, we talked for 5 hours. It was awesome. And I think he's actually moving to LA. So despite our rainy week, but he was, you know, this whole idea of making, you know, I think that's something that a lot of people, everyone in metaverse digital fashion right now loves talking about all these opportunities and possibilities and all this stuff, but no one actually knows what they're making or how they're making it. They're not even looking at the gaps in the market. They're just like, it's the conversations are just kind of ridiculous. So I think this idea of making and utility, I love utility over military because it's non-combative. It has functionality. And I think it's exactly where we hit our sweet spot. And then it kind of like, you know, if you got to see that little presentation in the beginning of like the libraries and that like media lab type thing, that photo that I have in that presentation, there's something really beautiful about that space that we exist in of like academics, but we're not using it just as talk, right? Like we're actually going to create stuff. So there's something I think intrinsic to NFL that can maybe be the baseline of what this zine or this work leads to. And that has there's a lot of space in there to exist in.
Another thing, thinking about older, like much older sort of models and concepts of fashion that springs to mind for me is that if fashion is about fashioning, about making details and surfacing in certain ways, before the age of mass production, no two things were very likely to be the same. So things would be after a fashion, they would be fashioned in certain ways. Whereas fashion today means that there are very hard edges around this product and that product. Whereas that's anathema at a time when everything is handmade and everybody gets bored finishing something unless they're sort of under sort of pain of death or penury if they don't do it to the exact specifications. And so fashion under those circumstances is something where individual details and features have to be much more identifiable because the object per se is not the thing. It's do too large a scope for being able to evaluate something on. And so fashion in a world, like pulling a world back to a place where individual articles are no longer an appropriate unit of accounting, a unit of measure for what is the fashion of a thing, is an interesting thing to be able to play with. In a world of things like mass customization and 3D printing and other pieces like that, it means that it's no longer items, it's attributes and aspects of those items that can be kind of pursued with certain details and certain fashionings.
Yeah, I love that whole. I think that's even an article or a body of work right there about talking about having gone from pre-industrial revolution to industrial revolution to where we are with manufacturing, to the fact that, you know, now we have fake Birkin bag parties, right? Have we talked about that in this group?
Now, what's that about?
Oh my God, I can't remember what call I had this on, these fake Birkin bag parties, right? Does anyone have a Birkin bag here? Okay, so, you know, like a Birkin bag goes for like between $30,000 and $100,000, depending on the elements of it. Now, fakes have gotten so good that there are now, so Birkin bags, if you have an Hermes Birkin bag that's real, it's $30,000, but a fake one is now more valuable than a real one because the fake ones you can't replicate. So they're having these fake Birkin bag parties on the Upper East Side of New York City where women get together and sell each other fake Birkin bags because they're the actual exclusive item. No one else will have that bag. And so you're talking about exclusivity, right? Like nobody can have that bag because it's illegal to make the fake. So there's no mass production of it. So that the idea that Hermes is now mass production to me is comical, right? Like literally hysterical that this century-old leather shop is considered mass production. People are spending tens of thousands of dollars to buy the fake because it's considered the only authentic object left. It's just fascinating. I'll link an article to it. It's wild. It's also, you know, peak privilege and
Yeah, it's generating some ideas. I mean, in my head, like instead of like the current archetypes, they have all the brands, like they have the full spread, like it's, you know, it's whatever, some, you know, Italian word or whatever, Roma or whatever like that. But instead of brands, maybe the full spreads are for a specific artisan, right? You know, so it's, you know, it's Nadim, right? It's, you know, Nadim and his, you know, and his leather work, right? And then that's what that, you know, it's, and then it harkens back to the maker, right? You know, it's like, it's the privileging of the maker, but it feeds into that, you know, that Birkin bag, right? You know, the fake Birkin bags, because they're made, you know, somewhere in, you know, in Istanbul or wherever, right? You know, in back alley, right? You know, there's some artisan that's just really good at faking these, right? You know, and then instead of the nameless brand being being what's privileged, you know, the maker's privilege. So it's, you know, it's not, you know, so it's like Nadim, you know, or what, you know, or Tasia or something like that, right? Is the and it's not a focus on the brand, but it's a focus more on the maker, but then it still sticks to that, to the current archetype in enough of a way where it can have this wait what kind of moment and then still speak to something. Just an idea from what you brought up.
I really want to jam this in on that as well, is that it's Hermes that makes the fake Birkin bag so valuable because of how aggressively they police the space of the fakes. So the reason why, you know, have you ever seen like the P and Calvin stickers? They exist because Bill Watterson refuses to make merch that would pay for the enforcement of that as a space, which also means that the sort of regulatory enforced scarcity of something has an impact on how aggressively a piece of IP is policed, has an impact on how scarce bootleg or illegal things in that space are, which means that if you pursue building luxury or fashion things that happen to feature IP that is more aggressively policed, then it means that the manufacturer techniques and methods for it have to be more evasive, which means that it could be driven up in value because it will be scarcer. So that means that like having like Mickey Mouse print things is inherently going to be more dangerous and therefore scarcer. And if you can find something more aggressive than Disney as a thing for protecting its intellectual property, then that would be funny. But yeah, like that Hermes makes that space, and that it's a feature of this scarcity that if you find something like that, then you can sort of look to it to be end up more expensive.
Yeah, and I guess a piece that I'm really trying to research now that I don't quite understand is how do we police this digitally, right? Like if people are building out, they're digital, most people interact with digital identities first or more than with physical identities, right? So I see more Birkin bags on Instagram than I do in real life by just simply Googling or searching Birkin on Insta. So if people can start making, Birkin bags in Midjourney or whatever, Dolly or whatever, what is to keep, do IP lawyers have to get involved to prevent that from being, then filtered onto a photo and people promoting having Birkins? Like, I don't know how that, do they want that? I don't know what that, just what gets diluted, what doesn't, I don't know.
I'm sure they'll try.
Yeah. I mean, that's a massive flood of.
That's a huge disruption with the AI and just that you're right. If that's the place where we interact, right? Is the digital space, right? Then that's we're already seeing a huge disruption because we can't trust anything that's digital. And also, and this is just, maybe it's just me, but I've been sitting so much in Midjourney that like I go out into the real world and like I'm seeing like people in clothes and things. It's like, is there 7 fingers on that woman? It's like I'm spending too much time in it, right? So it's kind of blending together in that way. But I like the idea of IP being just, again, going back to, is there some sort of economic disruption that disrupts luxury, right? Because that would disrupt IP, right? And maybe I'm too much in the Star Trek Next Generation world of where we can replicate gold, so now nothing has value, right? So we just but
I mean, I've been I was cutting you off, sorry.
No, I was riffing. Go ahead.
I was laughing at something similar to that. I was laughing about, been listening to the trials of the TikTok ByteDance, and it's like, like what if our Brandel, we were having a conversation about this with like web governance, right? Like how do you start to come in and have it's so delayed with as fast as these companies move. So like, I just have this vision of like a bunch of people coming, like a bunch of lawyers coming in post all of these Midjourney things coming out, or all these, AI images coming out, that it's comical to me to think that there's going to be policing so far after the fact that people have created all of these images, and it's going to have taken off so far before anyone can police it, right? So to me, it's comical, but it's also very real. Like, how does Hermes or Calvin Klein or anyone protect their brand or their IP? But I had that same thing yesterday. I signed up for like every single AI program this week, and I was walking out of my kitchen and my cat was walking towards me, and I was like, you should be on a cloud right now. Like because every Midjourney, there's like a ton of people doing cat stuff and like dog stuff. So I was like, why aren't you on a cloud? Like every image I've seen is like some cat on a cloud or in like an astronaut suit. Like, where's your cloud? Like your reality starts to get really distorted.
It does. Yeah. It really does.
Which nice. I kind of love. Yeah,
it's
well,
kinda
maybe
scary.
we should riff around some topics for the first. There's clearly some topics here that the first zine has ready to go.
Okay. I like it. I like it. And I'm also thinking like how do the two archetypes blend, the zine and the traditional magazine, like a hybridization of the two. Just materially, not content, but just
I mean, two thoughts on that. Like sort of a hallmark of the fashion magazines, like how thick can it be, right? Like how heavy can it be? And there's definitely been a sort of like tome like character to certain magazines in the past, whereas a zine is obviously made at home, staple bound or whatever string. So it kind of depends, like is the thing that you would want to make heavy and just so so weighty that it can't be argued with, which is I think sort of what the impression of those things would be, or is it light?
or it could be like light and like zines. I see them as being very dense in content, but light materially. And the Vogue is very light in content, but like dense materially, right? Because it's all just images, which I really like. That part I really like because it's just it's I think that speaks a lot to like NFL's sort of remit of just letting the object speak for itself, right? Because it's got all these double spread ads where it's just like a brand and then clothes or an accessory or something like that, right? Like you can't get more vague that like, why is this model holding this ergonomic multi-tool, right? It's like that's like the weight, but it's like kind of frame that. But back to like the zines and the like, how do you could make a zine that's made from really thick paper or something like that, right? So it's really light, it's like dense in content, but it would be very light materially if it wasn't made from like this thick rag paper or something like that, or something along those lines. I don't want to make it impossible to make, because
You can make it like a bath book or a board book.
A board book.
There's
but yeah, definitely ideas to the materiality of it, and then the feasibility of the materiality first, because the remit is to make the thing, right? So but zines have like a punk, they've got a punk aesthetic, they've got the text is sloppy, there's a lot of collaging, which there's that one archetype that's really specific to fashion magazines where it's like the trend pages where it's like 100 things and just little blurbs. That's very zine like to me, and then that speaks back to the the fashion magazines, right? And also to like Tiger Beat and all those other magazines, right? It's like, but maybe it's focusing on that, which is like the little blurbs and like it's all this kit, right? But it's not fashion, it's not like ties and blazers and things like that. It's like the multi-tools or things that are one-off handmade things by this artisan or something like that, right?
I wonder if this
Right.
is where we bring into, like last week we were talking about stickers. I wonder if the zine is something that can also just be stuck somewhere, or like it has, like a lot of people take those old magazines and they make them into like wallpaper in a bathroom. Or I think about how like when I was little, I'd walk through St. Mark's Square before it became, or like Astor Place. And those were like hotbeds of like punk culture, right? In New York City. Astor Place, not, yeah. But I love this idea of like something that's maybe embossed, or like you peel it off and you can stick it so that there is that like punk quality to it, where it almost takes up some space rather than it just being a pamphlet.
It becomes part of the environment.
Yeah, I'm trying to find a way to get stickers out there, but And I love the idea of like someone handing me something and then I could like take it off and just put it up there. And then it almost becomes like you have to like scrape it off. There's something rebellious to me about that as well.
Yeah, well, I got kids and they get these sticker books, right? You know, and it's just
Yeah,
books
love
of
those.
stickers. And maybe they're, you know, the stickers are the little blur that's got the image and the little blurb of the maker, and you take them off and then you put them into the environment, you know, and it just to help popularize the maker, right? You know, and to champion the maker, right? You know, I like that.
Yeah, it's fun to riff
I'm-
on this.
I was really taken by the mention of the sort of the magazine to wallpaper pipeline, and it reminded me of the way that sack dresses made from flour sacks, especially for children. Once flour manufacturers realized that children were being dressed in flour sacks, they started putting sort of floral print and basically made to order just about designs on the flour sacks such that they would be clothing that people could wear with dignity.
Remember,
And so the idea that magazines could play a similar role in terms of the expectation that they are eventual ornamentation for people's spaces means that you could design them with this specific intent that they turn into those things. And that advertising plays a dual role of being able to be an advertisement in the magazine at first, but also ultimately sort of ornamentation for the placement in a magazine in a sort of a domestic context as well. One of the challenges with that is that the real estate, the sort of the physical surface area of a wallpaper or whatever, is much greater than the stuff that you can fit into a magazine. But something that you could do is have stickers that actually are more densely packed and they're sparsely arranged on a wall or on a surface, such that you kind of unpack it and it becomes a gestalt picture of something that you have the ability to kind of transform and disassemble by virtue of being able to make sort of patterns out of the gaps between the stickers on the thing. It only gives you so much, but it's an interesting thing to be able to play with.
I love that. Back to the what I heard of it because I jumped off quick, but back to the thin making the think. I've got this like McSweeney's, if anybody knows McSweeney's.
Sure.
So this is a very thick book, but it's actually made up of little books that have, and the binding is magnetic, right? And it just kind of sticks in there. And so you could have a bunch of sticker books that somehow stick into the binding, right? And then so you've got like the thick, and it maybe the outside of it looks like a Vogue or something like that. So, oh, that's a nice thick, you know, book. But when you open it up, you've got all these little inserts or something like that, which are like sticker books and zines and things like that. And then that way you could emulate the one, but feed into the other. And that wouldn't be, I mean, the magnet, I don't know how they did that, but that might be hard to source, but it could be something simpler, right? You know, that it's just like inserts that are held with like a binding or something like that.
One thing I would just say is we should never hold ourselves back from at the idea stage if we're not sure exactly how to manufacture it.
Got it.
Because if it's been done, we can figure it out and
Yeah.
then make a decision. People might be like, yeah, so minimum motor quantity 1 million. You good with that? We might be like, oh, but at least we under. One of the things I'm fascinated about that I would love to that I kind of pay attention to as we're doing these actually making shit is really learning and understanding all the tooling, like how do these things get made? Because then I think it just opens up all these other great avenues for knowing what we can do and how to do it and all that kind of stuff. So it's even figuring out how to do the trading cards for Jed Sheet. Like I was fascinated. You just there are people that do it, and then there's another level where it's a little bit more complicated, but at least we know. At least we know, and then we can kind of keep pushing on it. You have that power of knowledge.
Well, then instead of stickers, how about it's magnets, right? And then we're not being destructive in the built environment. We're just, you have like little, because I've seen those too, where they're just, you punch them out right? You just, the kid, you know, they're just little magnets that you punch out and put everywhere, right? You know, so
Yeah,
maybe we look into like a magnetic binding or something like that, and then emulate, you know, the thickness of the original form factor, but then we have this diversity inside of it, you know, that can come out and stick everywhere and be part of and then help make our environment too.
yeah. Yeah,
Yeah, there's something I was thinking about, Brandon, comment with these stacks. There's something we could get so heady about, you know, if we print these things on canvas or cotton or whatnot, you know, does the material itself become templates for, you know, do we then end up, you know, like releasing the pattern for whatever garment, and then you can make that garment from the zine, right? Like, and then you're wearing the ideology of the lab, right? Or you can, maybe it's the lining, or if you flip it inside out, the ideology or the whatever is the lining, right? Like a Paul Smith style thing, you know, which I think is so cool.
And if you do it over multiple issues, then you have the fur issue that has the certain amount of footage of fur that you have to use as the mechanism for publication, but also simultaneously is grist for the mill of being able to produce articles, like articles of fashion rather than articles in fashion.
I like it. I like it. That's great.
I can't.
Sorry.
No, that was awesome. I love that.
But yeah, like another interesting thing with that is that if you have like a fashion magazine that is made out of so much pleather and so much rayon and so much faux fur, then it gives you a range of options in terms of what it ultimately becomes. And so then the magazine itself can be sort of an illustration of the options, the alts that this whole sort of series of materials can then be fashioned into. Or it can be just a single thing, so that you have a range of things that you can kind of turn it into as a consequence of seeing the totality of all of the space being described somehow on it, with it.
It reminds me of the material libraries that the interior designers would have that I used to work with, right? It's books of materials. And I love the idea of, I was going to bring it up, but then I censored myself, but now I'm going to bring it up again. I'm going to break the censor. But my grandmother and mother had just stacks and stacks of these fashion patterns that they'd get from Joanne Fabrics. If we're going to celebrate the maker, you know, why aren't those, you know, fashion patterns part of the zine, right? You know, and you know, just have those as I don't know if that's been baked into like the everyday archetypes, but that's totally an everyday archetype, you know, for at least in the world that I grew up in, right? It's, you know, those little pouches or whatever that have the big fold out you know, patterns for actually making the clothes that are, you know, that are featured or something.
Totally. Well, it's a question of legibility for whatever subgroup. And if those are a renderable and legible sort of form for people to recognize and celebrate with, then, you know, all the better. And so one, it's cool to be able to celebrate things that people really do know how to read. And two, it's cool to be able to invent things that nobody really does actually currently know how to read, but pretend that they're some kind of socially legible form and norm for expression and representation that people are only left to sort of scratch their heads and ponder at today.
That could be one of the digital avenues. You could have a smaller rendering of the fashion pattern with like a QR code to a larger, you know, to a larger resolution that somebody could go get plotted or whatever, right? You know, to make their own chore coat or whatever. And then that really breaks down, you know, again, that IP breaks down the IP and breaks down, you know, the idea of exclusivity, right? Because you're giving away that you're open sourcing what's in there, you know.
Yeah, my mind immediately goes to AR Quick Look and the idea that you can get an image and then look at just the actual whole full-size sort of layout of all of the outlines of the fabric at real scale on your phone or whatever else. and then potentially the idea of seeing the garment being sort of assembled or cut out or whatever. And it makes me really want to make an animated origami AR quick look file, so that you have not just the like a crane, but the actual assembly of the crane happen in front of you, such that you could potentially, play and pause it and see it right next to you in real space rather than having to watch it on YouTube. But yeah, that's really fun.
Another idea comes, oh, go ahead, please.
No, please, Drew.
Another idea, just quickly, like feeding into AI, right? You were talking about, what's real and on Instagram, and if Midjourney can create all these Birkin bags, maybe there's in this, whatever this archetype is, there's a zine that's just AI prompts with seeds, right? Because you can put seeds in Midjourney, like alphanumeric seeds, and then it's supposed to generate something very, very similar if you use the same seeds, right? So maybe it's like a list of, like, an index of prompts that you can scan in your photo, and then you have this index of prompts, and then it would have something, along the same lines, but with your kind of face on it that you could post to whatever
Or
social media.
suppose, just back to your other thing about the Joanne Fabrics patterns, which I find fascinating. It's like the prompt to generate a pattern. Like it's a Midjourney, it's a future, it's a different generative AI where it's like,
Oh, I bet it could do it.
I like a box cut. I want a pocket at the breast, and it should be open to this size, and or influenced by, I want a bit of this designer and this designer, but I would like it in a blue taffeta. And it's just
About
the output
taffeta
is just,
today.
yeah, I'm just stuck on the taffeta. It's fun to say taffeta. But it cooks out patterns. That's the only thing it does. You can imagine these very specific kinds of generators.
It could I'd for sure do it, because I was doing pattern diagrams just by throwing that into the prompt. And then the article that it generated it all looked like, just with all the little, the numerical codes and its garbled text descriptions and stuff like that, but it emulated it right away.
Yeah.
Do you all remember, I may have brought this up before on another call, but it's appropriate now too. Do you remember Nest Magazine, an interior design magazine? I'll link it here. This was my first internship ever. And Joe Holtzman, who started it was a magazine that was just incredible. I'm bringing it up because sort of we were talking about, Brendel, all the production of the magazine was always, the materiality of it was always based on the articles that were in it. So when I was there, we were doing a couple articles on dominatrix and sex rooms in wealthy New Yorkers' homes. So like Westchester couples that would have these sex rooms. And so the cover of the magazine was going to be in plastic, and it had a zipper around it, like a gimp hood. I mean, the guy is amazing. He sold a Matisse sculpture that he inherited to make this magazine, right? Like privilege on privilege. I mean, his house is just covered in Rothkos. The guy is just brilliantly weird. He paints aliens. He's just fucking awesome. But the magazine, no one could ever buy it, and it couldn't sustain itself. But everything about it was about, the material always had to be part of what was inside of it, right? And so people collect all these things because, it's not just a magazine like you said about Vogue. Like there's no just magazine that sits on your shelf that people just throw away. Like these are collector's items that have real value to them. And I love this idea of like, if we are materially exploring something, or if we're partnering up with somebody, that zine can be about that material, or if the idea lends itself to that material, and then the pattern links to that, then whatever garment, like the garment shift with that material as these things come out with each edition. It doesn't have to be always the same thing.
And then going all the way back, like it doesn't just have to be garden patterns, it could be like tooling patterns and things
Totally.
for making bowls and and, stencils and, or plumbing diagrams or, all that kind of stuff, right? So it doesn't have to, I like the idea of keeping clothes in there somewhere, just so it's not, completely, like maybe start with that. Like maybe the archetype starts with clothes and it starts normal. And then by the end of it, you're like, what happened? Right now we're talking about, we've got patterns for making, joins for our yurt, right? Or something like that, right? So it starts normal and then it blends into, things that are completely just not, and so you can kind of see the evolution and disruption as it, in real time as you flip through the document.
So that makes me think about that subscription box type of thing. Like we are in the future sending back material to people to build something to get them to our future. It's like, I know there's movies that have that concept, right? But it's like we're giving them clues to build something that they have to use, whether it be tooling or garment or whatever. It's like, it becomes this sort of treasure hunt for them to get to where we are almost, right? Like to save them, right? Like get to the, not that that has to be the point, but there's something really funny about this idea of us sending back information for people from, present to get to where we have evolved to or where we've explored to.
It makes me think too of like palindromes. It can be read, both directions. And, like it's so often the case, like a magazine will come out where like, you can read, there's like two covers, and it's like there's you can read it one direction or read it the other direction.
Yeah, this Harper's Bazaar has alternate covers inside of it.
Do you know about ambigrams, where you flip them over and the figure ground of the text reverses and it reads like the white part reads as black and the black part, flip it over, reads a different word in white.
Nice.
Well,
I'm fairly good at making them. Scott Kim invented the idea. Ambigram. I was thinking of this bespoke boxes when you guys were, I was just listening in and it occurred to me, like, you see those ads for this bespoke boxes, they send you one every month. It'd be cool to get one from the future.
how much postage is that though? I mean, really?
Yeah.
It's gotta be a killer. There a universal stamp for that?
Didn't somebody, I feel like, was it Jed or Dre or Julian? I'm just trying to call out names who I think maybe have talked about this. Wasn't there a futures subscription brand that would send you like cereal one month or this object another month? Does that ring any bells? Like these like little trinkets?
Lab 24. There was the 2046 lab or Lab 2046. I don't know whether it clearly enunciated it itself as being from the future or just from the mind of a sort of an arch nihilist. I don't know if there's a difference, but it was pretty.
What was it called?
Lab 2046.
Yeah, I don't recall.
2046
Okay.
lab, yeah, but it's and it was it's this Russian industrial designer. No, I think unless there's something else that's sort of this, because I feel like
For an earlier call, somebody said something like they got a box of
Lab
cereal
2046.
in the mail.
Oh, really?
They got something else in the mail, and it was like random things would come to them each month from subscribing to this design studio. I'll ask Julie next time we talk.
It could have been lot 2046, but I feel like you have already seen that before.
There's a version of this for just like manly men. You guys ever seen those Instagram ads? You never know how the algorithm's targeting you, but it's like, beard oil and hatchets and
Yeah, exactly.
No, I used to get them. I used to get them for it's called a Spreza box, and it would come with a tie or a tie clip and, or wallet or something, something, but that's a neat idea. It comes with, like the patterns, that we're talking about, or it comes with some strange, handmade, multi-tool or something for, prying open your car after the climate change sun has kind of baked the door shut or something. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, one kind of note on this too, like to distinguish the whole Earth catalog from this type of thing is like the catalog didn't actually sell anything itself. Like
Oh,
at one point they did have like a van or a bus or something that sold stuff, and then they did have a storefront, but largely it was an aggregator.
Right.
Which is why all those technocrats were like, oh, now that there's Google, we don't need to do this anymore. Obviously, those are not the same thing, but nonetheless, they were just saying you could buy this stuff.
God, I
and
love
which
this book.
which is like, to all the Bay Area people, I would love to go to the Long Now Cafe at some point just to see what those fuckers are up to. Like, I just want to see how that world has manifested in the present day. But anyways, like a fashion magazine is like, okay, you can buy this stuff, but like this object is not an actual pathway to buying them, so it's a different infrastructure on the back end, right, required to like hold objects in a warehouse and send them to people versus just like putting representations of them on paper and then shipping them out.
I'm having a conversation in my head about the NFL mark and whether that could be a stamp of approval that products would be seeking. Like, could we reverse the script a little bit and be a thing in the world that was a mark of future thinking forward, so it actually meant something instead of being a fictional element in a sense. Like cradle to cradle certification or, anything else like that. Like, oh yeah, we think this will stand up to any number of possible futures. It's good to go. I myself come from a worldview where time flows relatively. So some pockets of place are faster than others. You guys are really fast. You're accelerated and you're essentially from the future in my worldview. So, if some place has dealt with backpacks for 10 years and they've really done 100 years of man-hour research on it because the way they work or something, then they should get a mark. They're from the future. That's how I see it. Because some places are so backwards. They're obviously never thinking. Somebody said that to me about chairs yesterday. They were talking about how, like, we all sit in chairs whose design hasn't been updated since the Victorian era. I don't know, signposting for the near future laboratory chair. Mm-hmm.
On chairs specifically, I know there was a detour, but LAVR did a lot of really cool things with the idea of what office furniture should look like, with people doing their work in virtual reality, since they don't need to be ergonomically posed and poised to look at screens. They can kind of just lie back and whatever kind of OPM den configuration that you need to be able to make. But to make it office furniture, then it needs to have a certain affect in terms of the shape of the throw cushions that people sprawl around on in order to be able to work on their Excel sheets while lying on their back. So that was pretty cool. They didn't get anywhere with it at the time, but I think they might have just been early to the party.
Well, I definitely think freeing ourselves from screens is going to be a good thing. Yes, although freeing other things from screens is maybe going to be more of a mixed bag. I was at a presentation by the people who are responsible for the 3D graphics, specifically on the web, WebGL and WebGPU, and Unity, the company that is one of the big two of making video game engines, was showing that they have they're pursuing a web GPU implementation, like a full-fledged implementation for the web of all of their games. And I checked with them, and they said that means that they can and they will be pursuing it for web XR. So that means that not only will people be able to make VR games very easily with Unity, but they'll also be able to be sort of basically presented or in the place of basically banner ads within that future as well. So just the sheer sort of crapulous ubiquity of immersive experiences based on the relative cost of it was something that kind of I got a little bit of vertigo when they said it. It's like, oh, that's a
That's a new place for us to live in. Okay, exciting.
The way that advertising in the virtual space is looked at is just, I've only caught a few good whiffs of that heady drug, but they really have some ideas over there. Doesn't look very user friendly. My mom's showing up here. I'm gonna have to bail. It's great to see you guys this morning. And Brandel and Jed, I both want to talk to you. Drew, at some point, I haven't like hooked on a specific with you, but you two, I'm super curious to have a breakout sometime this week or just to vibe better. I'm not here.
Sure.
Peace
Cool.
out.
Nice to see you, Phil.
Take care.
Yeah. Yeah, Phil, he just left, but I was gonna say, I just, nothing specific about what the conversation's gotten to at the moment, but, he, world building type of thoughts, from last week, we continued the conversation a while, and then he went off and sort of had a conversation with GPT about world building with the sheep, and it was really quite interesting, like just where he took it all. And it's about 12 pages. It's in the channel, the Android's Dream of Electric Sheep. If you get a chance,
Sure.
take a scroll through. I haven't done a lot of that, so it was nice to see sort of his process of sort of how he was prompting and how he was speaking, and then kind of what was coming out, and just sort of how he kind of teased stuff out of it was cool. And then and sort of the aftermath of it, there's a dialogue there and a world, which I guess we verbally talked about before, just through some like visuals. But anyways, I think it seems like he's got a pretty good process going, and maybe he can apply some of that to the.
Yeah, it'll do that if you tell it who it is. It'll
Right.
And then you keep reinforcing, no, you're this person, you're this person, and then but it does take some teasing so it's not just derivative of what you told it, so where it gets kind of more creative. In fact, when you get into the if you do it programmatically, like through the terminal, you can there's an actual value you can set for its like creativity, like a flag or something like that, so, and it's unpredictability, right? It's like a zero, it's like a 0 to 1 or value or something like that. And like a 1 is like, it's this wacko, right? It's like, whereas 0, it's like, it's very formal with a tie on or something like that. So it's neat how especially GPT-4, I think GPT-4 they amp that, they turn that dial up a little bit.
Yeah, I haven't even messed with that, but yeah, I've been kind of stuck in the switching of paintbrushes per se with Midjourney 4 to 5 like this past week, just looking at previous prompts and seeing new outcomes, kind of just based on the evolution of what's offered, I guess.
Yeah, same. And it's weird because I'm like, oh, now I'm nostalgic for 4. It's like it's like
I'm not quite sure how to get back. Like I'm trying to blend the two, and I'm not sure how to do that.
It's in set. You just do this / settings, and then you can set all the versions and stuff like that in the Discord there. Yeah. So
yeah. No, I got that much down, but I don't. I guess just visually, it's like or not even it's just like what it interprets. It interprets just much differently in some ways.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
And
if you're used to just speaking to it in keywords, it's hard to switch to like the more. I think B5 is like more explicit or something like that.
Yeah. Something of the sort. I'm trying to learn it a bit more.
I like the metaphor though of switching brushes. So.
Yeah, it's kind of like that. It's like getting a new, but they're just powerful tools. But it's kind of just like getting there's the newest brush.
Yeah, I want to
a little unruly. How do I handle this a bit?
I want to start blending like Photoshop filters to like film filters and stuff like that to get a more realistic, you know, especially for the Fashion Future magazine. You know, it's so it doesn't all look like it comes from Midjourney, but applying like that, you know, that like Redshift or or maybe they used the older twin lens reflex cameras or something like that, like applying those filters to it, because like DALL-E will do that. Like if you give DALL-E in the prompt engineering, if you put like a type of film, it'll emulate that film, that look, but I haven't been able to get Midjourney to do that at all. But there's enough of those in like Photoshop and stuff like that where you can start blending the tools, right? You know, so it doesn't look like any one of them.
Is there anything yet where you can just like deliver something, a 3D model, and be like, hey, start building this into scenes for me? Like I think of like Randall, your website, that has like your existing, models that are manipulatable, right? Like you can zoom in and change the view. Can you give like the URL of say your website to one of these programs and be like, look, you have, I'm just thinking, Drew, about like all of how terribly Midjourney renders like skateboarding. It has just like no idea what to make of it. Like it can't, and like you see this when anytime anybody ever tries to like illustrate a skateboard, they just like, they don't have a clear enough sense of like what it is or how it works to be able to make a good picture of it. And so I just wonder, like, can you give it source models to integrate into pictures?
You could do that programmatically with like DALL-E. You can feed it, like you can create your own, essentially your own, what do they call it? The teaching models or whatever like that, right? You give it your own data to learn from. And that's what they're doing with Midjourney, right? To get, now I'm bridging five finger hands, right? They're feeding it a bunch of 5 finger hands to try to get it to do it right, and so you can, so programmatically, I mean, you have to go like that one level deeper. You can't do it like at the consumer level, right? To at least not yet, to feed it your own, like corpus of images or something like that.
Gotcha.
Yeah, it's a matter of adding the points of leverage and figuring out how important sort of specialist data needs to be in comparison to the general corpus to intervene on the sort of the parameters of the model. It was sort of similar to like we at this presentation of WebGL, WebGPU, the former head of AutoCAD, who's a really cool older guy, got up and said like, has ChatGPT or Copilot or any AI tools been useful in creating this new web technology, this new graphics technology? And everybody was like, well, no, because the language, we are literally working out what the language looks like right now. So by definition, there are no examples on the internet for it right now for people to be able to use. And if you ask it, then it just pretends that some older language is this new language. And when you say that's not this language, it goes, oh, I'm sorry, here it is, and just kicks the can down the road with additional errors. I think it would be really interesting for people to need this enough to be able to plug in, because one thing that, so Midjourney, you can give them an image, not a model, but an image, but you can conceive of a model as a bunch of images of it. So having the ability to send 100 images of a skateboard through the pipe and have that be kind of constructed by virtue of having access to a ground truth 3D model for being able to do that isn't going to be perfect, but it will have a bigger influence than simply sending a single image of a skateboard through. So like I said, like introducing like points of leverage onto a system like that and making sure that folks who are responsible for these models see the way in which just getting the anatomy of a skateboard right is super important for skateboard people would be a really valuable thing to pursue and see where it goes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I had this moment yesterday where like somebody brought me their kid's Target skateboard, and they're like, they spun the wheels in front of me. Like, can you make this better? And I was like, the trucks are made of plastic. It's like, okay, like how much did you pay for this? It's like $40. I was like, all right, cool. I pointed at mine. I was like, this is $240. And I was like, broke it down a little bit. And like you ride the two things like they're incomparable, right? Like mine turns and feels like it's attached to your brainstem, and that one, it's like you're riding a piece of paper. Like it just doesn't do anything. But like that exists in the digital realm as well, right? Like, is it the thing or does it look like the thing? I don't know, just for broader communication. I just wonder how that functions with Midjourney, right? Like, how convinced will we be over the long haul by stuff that sort of like is approximate, but not really.
Well, I got to go return a couple of skateboards to Target.
I was gonna say, if you bought those there, let me help you. Those won't. Nobody's gonna get any delight out of any of that.
Understood. But they got Vision Streetwear there now. Remember that from back in the day. Anyway, I do have to go. I gotta. I'll just. I'll give the meeting to you, Rendell. It's here, make host. Look at that. I learned something. All right. And then y'all have a fantastic week, and I'll see you in the Discord.
Awesome.
Cheers.
What would you guys say is your favorite AI program to be playing around in? I've signed up for about 7 right now, and I'm trying to figure out which one. Yeah, I've given all my information away. Which, I mean, never, where was it ever stored to begin with, right? Never protected. But you know, I am not a fan of Discord user interface. So I don't love the Midjourney experience, but I enjoy what it's putting out or spitting out. And then DALL-E has been the other one that I've been liking. But I signed up for other ones. What do you enjoy using?
Probably Randall's good. I've only really used Midjourney at this point. I mean, like more in depth, I guess.
Yeah.
But I'm comfortable in Discord, so it made sense.
Yeah.
And that was sort of what Julian poked me with. It's just like, why don't you try this one? So I've been happy with it. I mean, I'm kind of getting to that point where the reason I wasn't using it, now I'm there where I'm using it too much, or thinking about it a little bit too much. No, I mean, not really, but I've gotten to a point where it's pretty intuitive, just to kind of fumble through it in a positive way. And but yeah, so I don't have a lot of experience with other ones.
Yeah, personally, I haven't gotten very far. Randall, I'd be curious to know what you've got.
Yeah, I feel like you dive into a lot of these things pretty deep. So
my worldview is pretty hostile to AI, actually. So I haven't used many of them at all. What I like is instrumentality, and all of the presentations of AI right now are at arm's length in a way that means that I can't use them the way I like using things. So I don't have a lot of experience with them. My dad has actually asked me to get ChatGPT to make some shit up about North Korea, and so I have a task for them, but I haven't pursued that. I've used Midjourney. Maybe I'm using it wrong. If there's a way of getting a more sort of private conversation than in the public channels, but I despise the visual noise of seeing everybody else's presentations and it's a real stumbling block for my ability to kind of focus on what it is that I mean and what it is that I'm think by virtue of doing stuff. So if there's a way to have it as a more private, calm space, that would be a lot better for me.
Are you just talking about where you're prompting or creating in a way?
Yeah. I mean,
I mean, I don't know if this is what you meant, but I mean, I paid for one of the the mid tiers to mess around with it for like the last 2 months, and but then you're just in your private, you're just like DMing with it privately, and so I don't look at any of the noise of any other work at this point, which is, so all I'm really seeing is just a channel of my thoughts or prompts, but that was very helpful. Yeah, because I totally get like until I did that, it's just way too much for me. It's like overload, so I can't I can't look at all that other public stuff all the time and try and think about something. So anyways, so now I
I
just,
didn't realize that was even an option. That makes a lot, I mean, it makes perfect sense. There's no reason why they can't provide that as a capability, but I didn't know that it was even available for money, so.
yeah.
I think
And
they
then-
have free
and then-
tiers, don't they?
Yeah, I think I'm doing the middle one right now, which technically I guess is not private, but I don't see where it goes, so it doesn't bother me. But yeah, it's basically just, let me see if I can quickly just share that, what it looks like here. Will this share? Like, so, oh, host is disabled sharing. I don't know if you know how to mess with that. Random, but I guess I can't share it. Yeah. Anyways, yeah, there is a private channel. And that makes it, I think, a lot more useful.
Yeah,
Yeah,
but that makes, and so, but is there any way not to do them without being in a public channel in a free tier, or do you have to start it with $8 a month for that?
I think actually, well, I'm not certain on this, but there's when you look at the 3 tiers, well, like there's a settings option, right? And then in your settings, it seems like that I can't, here, I'll just screenshot it or whatever. There's public mode and then there's stealth mode, but I cannot access stealth mode unless I have like the most expensive account. And I'm assuming stealth mode just means that whatever you're prompting is not, public in some way. So yes, there's a way of doing it, but I don't think I can even access it with the mid-tier account. Yeah, the privacy thing is crazy, huh? That like, whether whatever you're up to there is public or not. Yeah, it's a weird thing to kind of create entirely in the public these days when you're come from a place that you didn't do that before. And
Well,
maybe it doesn't matter to a younger generation, I'm not sure.
in the least non-judgmental way I can say it, I'm just floored by how basic a bunch of the other digital noise is in that space. Like, it's just complete drivel.
Yeah.
well, and I will say, like, one of the things I'm so ready to nerd out on this whole topic of like the creation of AI, the limitations of it, and who's creating it, right? So like, one of the clients I'm working with right now, it's a queer company. I went on to Midjourney to generate some quick ideation around this queer aesthetic they had. I typed in queer icons, and the thing that it spit back was just it all looked like Madonna, or the poster of the woman who is flexing from like the wartime thing. And it's like, is that Rosie the Riveter, I think? And like, I can't show that to a client. It's wildly racist, right? It's wildly like Madonna and Rosie the Riveter. It's white, very fat. It's like there's no people of color. There's no this. So it's like it immediately sheds light on these huge gaps of like what it's being fed, what information it's being fed, right? And then so I could input more information right into it to have it spit out other information as well. But it's not, I find the whole thing so fascinating because I spent 3 or 4 hours and I was like, I should just be drawing this, right? Or I should be collaging the aesthetic that I'm trying to show to this client. I'm wasting my time trying to get an algorithm or a thing to do what I want. I already know what I want it to do. So yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, that said, on both fronts, it's kind of like going to the DMV or jury duty, where it's a leveler where you're reminded where the mode actually is, where like, oh, this is what the popular consciousness is. Something else that I really enjoy for that is the Wikipedia top 25 articles page.
No, is that a
where
thing?
yeah, and they have commentary. And looking at it today, like Article 1 is Everything Everywhere All at Once. Article 2 is Brendan Fraser. Article 3 and 4 are Kihui Chuan and Michelle Yeoh. Like, so it's just like, of course, that's where everybody is looking on Wikipedia this week. And yeah, like being able to recompose what it is that like people are thinking in the world from the top 25 Wikipedia, and also just being reminded about how crushingly basic the sort of popular imagination is from public Midjourney channels is it's not necessarily fun, but it's a useful service to be brought to people who can kind of end up in fairly rarefied airs at times.
Yeah.
I had this moment in the last few weeks where like the fifth graders that I teach are now getting their laptops after a long while of not like there was something backing them up. So now they finally have them. And I'm just a skateboard instructor, but now I'm like talking to these kids about like device use. I'm like find myself in this weird sort of like a kind of disciplinary role to be like, hey, like we're in skateboard class, not computer class, and that's not homework. That's a soccer game where you do a math problem that you get wrong and then you get to take a shot. Like it's, there's this weird thing. And I talked to the teacher about it yesterday. He's like, well, there's a real generational gap, or like a generation, not generation, but there's like a cultural gap in digital literacy. So like the sooner the kids get these tools, the better. And like they're all under 13, which supposedly is like YouTube's cutoff point. And he's like, oh, but YouTube is a part of their instruction for school. There's a lot of good stuff on there. And just like watching like certain priorities, take over others. Like, we like busted my kid the other day for like having taken their computer into their room and stayed up all night watching YouTube.
Yeah.
And like just watching nonsense, like not even good. Cause there's those blocks on like what you can search on YouTube with a school computer, but just like, there's just no digital literacy. They're like, well, we need this so that we can just assign homework remotely when they're out of school. And like, that's what they're solving for and nothing else. Cultural, like digital literacy gaps, but like not talking about the ways in which like these tools are designed to be addictive or whatever else. And I don't know, I guess this is a little bit of a tangent, but it just, you just end up with these like so many perverse incentives, and just like weird things happening that like are not at all people's intention. I don't know, it feels very near future.
No one's intention.
Right. Yeah. Nobody intended for like the kids to like be like, relationship with skateboard over a new best friend, YouTube. But that's what it looks like.
Yeah, and like not even YouTube. It's not a conspiratorial thing. It's just that people sort of misanticipate where the fundamental buttons on the human psyche are, and how easily exploitable they are once people kind of find them. Just that, like, something that I think about a lot in the context of like a couple of friends who like to get really cross about things on the internet is just that the word arousal now only means sexual arousal for a lot of people, but arousal is all of the things that kind of get people riled up in whatever form. And the internet finds ways to do that for you, and you find ways of doing it with the internet. And it's not actually necessarily part of anybody's goals, but like the two systems will kind of seek ways of satisfying that, and they can be part of nobody's goals. And it can be a pretty challenging thing when people don't realize how basic their own buttons are, and how to just mashing the same one all the time with pictures of Madonna or Rosie the Riveter or cute dog videos or whatever else.
I think non-conspiratorial is like such a perfect way to put it. my goddaughter was out in LA last week and she loves fashion. She's 8. And I was blown away by how many times she referenced going back to her iPad to pull something up, right? We would be talking about a dress and she's like, oh, what kind of fabric or what color? And then she's like, show me. And then she'd go get her iPad, or like if it's a photo, like everything goes back to some database or some image, or she wanted to pull it up on YouTube. There's a lot of parental controls, but she's always going back to this source. And you know, like not in this like YouTube is trying to control this child from age, you know, young age on, but it's the source of a lot of inspiration for her. So she's going back to look at all this stuff. And I was just blown away. I haven't been around a lot of kids, so I was just blown away by how much this iPad in this, she's got a phone, it's not connected to anything, but she's got her phone for accessing, you know, YouTube. And it was just shocking. I was like, whoa, I was just blown away. I don't know how parents do it with kids.
Well, and it's like probably the closest the kids get to a flow state on a regular basis, you know, just like information flow. And so it's like no wonder that it's addictive in some fashion. I mean, it also just then makes me wonder, like, where's the dearth in the rest of our culture? Like what else is not being satisfied by, you know, the physical world?
Yeah, and not to demonize it, I was trying really hard to be like, well, this child shouldn't be doing this, but I was like, why shouldn't they be doing this? I don't know. It brought up a lot of like, I know you two both have, or two of you have kids, and one, it's exhausting. I needed like a vacation from having a child for 4 days. I was done. But 2, I was just like, this is so exhausting mentally, just being like, how do you know what the kid's looking at? Because like she was looking at this, we weren't paying attention. The 3 of us, her parents and I, were talking in the car, and she was watching videos on YouTube, and they just cycled to the next video, right? So like at one point we were on our way to Malibu, so we were in the car for an hour and we totally forgot what she was doing, and she was watching a video about something that was not what she should be watching. It wasn't bad, but right, like it goes very quickly. So
yeah, we're kind of in like a no, we're not doing devices. Like I'm like pretty satisfied to just like have them not have a phone or a laptop until it's absolutely necessary. Like it's just a bigger wormhole that I'm willing to indulge, right? And like you can, I don't know, it's like as soon as the kids get devices, like you watch their imagination sort of like converge on some like lowest common denominator, right? Like my kid's queer, but like they're not looking up how to be queer on the internet, right? They have to figure it out themselves, which I think is maybe, hopefully, you know, a blessing in some way for them, because they get to like ask more, you know, personalized questions than just like finding like what is the unified aesthetic of, you know, of Rosie.
Yeah. On that note, I got to run to this actual consulting call for queerness. But I do like harnessing that non-doomsday feeling about tech. I try to hold on to that because it's not a, you know, non-conspiratorial is a good way to leave it.
Yeah, I mean, it's not evil, but it is not thoughtful either. And sometimes the results can like, and that also means that it doesn't absolve the consequence. It just means that you need to think about what stops it from having those disastrous consequences.
Totally. Well, and then the law, right? And that law actually, what was that law that literally absolved them of consequences, of tech companies being absolved of consequences that they're now looking at again?
Oh, Section 230, safe harbor.
Yeah. I know that. I think that's back on the docket as being challenged, right? Yep.
Yeah.
Fascinating.
I'm sure where it lines up against the popular American sensibilities. But then, yeah, like different regulatory environments are very different. Like New Zealand has a literal censor's office, so that not only is there not a First Amendment, but there's a whole wing of government. It's a very respected one and very restrained, set up to decide this context in which citizens' rights should be abridged. So yeah,
Right.
like infringed. So yeah, like there are different ways of doing it, and so it would be interesting for people to seriously entertain the possibility that there's a world without 230 and it does something, but I don't know.
What a good call today, guys. This was awesome. Thanks for awesome
Yeah,
chat.
thanks.
Yeah.
I'll see you guys next week.
Okay,
Cool.
take care.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Peace.
I'm gonna drop too.
All right, let's do it. See y'all next week. Hey, Randall, if you're free tomorrow, come up for free food and dancing and music in the city.
Yeah, I will definitely think about it. Thanks, Aaron. And if
Yeah,
not,
you-
let's try to plan something for the interval sometime.
Yeah, definitely. I think it'd be good for us to meet up as a group again soon. Or even one-on-one. I'd love to just hang out.
Yeah, absolutely. Cool. All right. Well,
Cool.
if I don't see you tomorrow, then have a great time with it.
Okay, great. Yeah, and your fam's welcome too. It's definitely it's like a kid-friendly event and all that. So bring whoever.
Yeah, my friend down the road is a skater. He's a guy who joined Aidan Fraser on the call. I think he just looked, but yeah, he's into that. So I might suggest that we head up for that.
Cool. Okay. Yeah, that'd be great.
Cool.
All right. Have a good one. I'll see you later.
Yeah.
Bye.